Welcome to the Tempo Store Meta Snapshot Breakdown Series. Following the Hearthstone Masters Tour in Las Vegas, the meta remains mostly the same. Some decks are seeing more play due to their time in the limelight, but aside from that, not much else differs. Freeze Mage is the deck that has been seeing most play lately due to Dog winning the tournament with it. The meta is beginning to feel stale and has slowly turned into a rock, paper, scissors meta like many before it did. Before we take a look at Tier 1, make sure to subscribe to the Tempo Storm YouTube channel to keep up with our Hearthstone content. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Tier 1 is comprised mostly of the same decks as previously, but mid-range Hunter falls out in favor of the faster Hunter archetype, Mech Hunter. This is partly because of mid-range Hunter's bad matchup against Tempo Rogue, and also partly because mid-range Hunter can feel inconsistent at times. This change has left Bomb Warrior to be at the top of the tier. Let's take a look at what makes Warrior so strong. It's not a surprise to anyone that Bomb Warrior is an extremely powerful archetype. The deck is very consistent and continues to abuse the power of both of the Dr. Booms. The hero card is one of the best value generators in the game. Bomb Warrior has been around since the expansion has come out and has been comfortably sitting on the top since. Without a balance change or new cards being released, expect to see it dominating the meta. Bomb Warrior preys on aggressive decks such as Murloc or Aggro Shaman due to the natural control shell that the Warrior has. On the other hand, Bomb Warrior struggles to beat decks like Cyclone Giants Mage as the large minions they play are simply too much for the Warrior to deal with. On top of this, the value generation from Mana Cyclone makes it hard for the Warrior to run the Mage out of resources consistently. Next up on the tier list is the previously mentioned Cyclone Giants Mage. This archetype makes use of cheap Mountain Giants alongside Conjurer's Calling to cheat out large threats much earlier than intended. Given the time to snowball, the Mage deck can make extremely threatening boards out of nothing. Cyclone Giants Mage does well against decks that don't put on much pressure, as they typically can't kill the large threats the Mage summons. Slower Warrior archetypes are guilty of this. Control Warrior, for example, can deal with multiple threats over and over again, but the Mage ones are often out of range of the Warrior's limited single target removal. This Mage archetype falls victim to faster archetypes that can apply huge amounts of pressure to kill them before they get their threats online. Mech Hunter, for example, is simply too fast for the Mage and can easily bully this deck. Tempo Rogue remains Tier 1 in this Tempo Store Meta Snapshot. Tempo Rogue remains a very powerful archetype and continues to prove itself as a very dominant force. Rogue has access to so many powerful tools with this classic set and has an array of cards that it can tech in to counter any meta. With the power of Edwin Van Cleef, it can find a win in any matchup when drawn. Tempo Rogue does best against board-based decks, as the Rogue can easily fight for board while developing threats of its own. As expected, the hardest matchup for the Rogue is both Warrior archetypes, as the Rogue can't deal with the removal they have. The Rogue also struggles with armor gain that the Warrior has, making it difficult for the Rogue to close out the game. Rounding off Tier 1 this time around is Mech Hunter. The deck found itself at the top of Tier 2 previously, but finds itself sneaking into the top tier. The deck is extremely quick and can make huge minions that are very difficult to deal with. On top of that, Mech Hunter can deal with any board thanks to Venomizer and Missile Launcher, giving it a get-out-of-jail-free card. Mech Hunter wants to play against decks that are either slow to achieve their game plan or that rely on a large minion sticking. For that reason, both Bomb Warrior and Conjurer-based mages are favorable matchups for the Hunter. Mech Hunter wants to avoid queuing into other aggro decks that are faster than it, such as Murloc Shaman, as once the Hunter loses the board in these matchups, it can be hard to regain it without simply dying. Tier 2 remains the tier that hosts the decks that are slightly too weak to make it into the top tier. All of these decks are powerful, but they're simply not consistent enough to find themselves dominating the meta. If the metagame changes around slightly, any one of these decks could sneak their way into Tier 1. Due to Tier 2 featuring a large number of decks, we'll just be going over the top 3. Let's take a look at the first one. Mid-range Hunter falls from glory in this snapshot, losing its spot on the top of the tier list. This archetype was seen as very powerful due to its good matchups against Warrior and Mage, but as more people began playing Hunter, players learned the matchup from the other side, making it less favorable than before. Despite this, mid-range Hunter is still a very versatile deck that can find wins in a lot of situations. Despite feeling fairly linear, this deck can be very complicated at times, and good players will shine more with this deck than others. Mid-range Hunter struggles against aggressive decks, as once they take over the board, it can be hard for the Hunter to take it back without a large combo of cards. Token Druid and Murloc Shaman stand out as two of the worst matchups for this Hunter. Next up in Tier 2 is Holy Wrath Paladin. This deck is very versatile, and when piloted well, it can often feel like there's nothing you can do to stop it. If it wasn't for Bomb Warrior being so prevalent on ladder, Holy Wrath Paladin would potentially be one of the best decks in the game. This matchup can feel unwinnable from the Paladin side due to the Bomb Warrior being able to kill you from 30 whenever they need to. In order to win, the Paladin needs to high roll massively, or the Warrior needs to not find any bombs. Holy Wrath Paladin does well against aggressive decks that rely on their board sticking, like Murloc Shaman, as the Paladin can clear their board and stall until they either kill their opponent or stick Shirvala the Tiger. Rising in popularity following Dog's tournament win, Freeze Mage finds itself climbing from Tier 3 all the way to the top of the second tier. Freeze Mage was an archetype that saw fringe play before this tournament, but due to its good matchups against both Warrior and Rogue, the deck can pull off amazing things. If you draw Luna's Pocket Galaxy early into the game, your opponent typically can't do anything against you. Freeze Mage struggles against faster decks much like Cyclone Giants Mage does. You don't have many ways to contest the board early, and if your opponent applies too much pressure, you often can't assemble your own pieces, leaving you to die to the aggression. In order to gain a competitive edge against the meta, look to target the first tier as much as you can. While it's difficult to do so, you can definitely gain an advantage by playing a deck well geared for the top matches. A good example of this is Zoo Warlock. While the archetype isn't impressively strong on its own, it's had a good matchup against Tempo Rogue and Cyclone Giants Mage and is only slightly unfavored against the other Tier 1 decks. This can be a really fun archetype to play if you're looking to gain an edge against those filthy net deckers while trying something out that isn't exactly meta. In conclusion, the meta has begun to hit a stale point in its life, and it doesn't seem to be changing very significantly currently. Even a major tournament couldn't shake things up, so without new cards, expect the meta to be very similar to this for the next while. Thank you for watching our Tempo Storm Meta Snapshot breakdown. We hope this video will help you on your journey to becoming legendary. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment and subscribe to keep up to date with the rest of our Hearthstone content. Until next time!